British, and when we first moved to the United States a few years back, it was a bit of a tough time in my life. Here I was in California, which everybody knows is the world headquarters of happiness, but I'd left all my family and friends behind. I was quite isolated, and really I was more lonely than happy. So I thought, I'm going to do what Americans do and pursue me some happiness. So I got out my phone and I went to the App Store. I was surprised to see that there were over 1,000 different options for apps that promised to make me happy one way or another. And the one that I ended up with would send me a text message every few hours with a photo montage of happy things. So beaches, sunsets, puppies, and also pictures of my own loved ones. So one night I'm at home and my phone buzzes. You know, that lovely sound that suggests that somebody from the outside world might be trying to get in contact, and I get that little Pavlovian jolt of excitement. And then I look and no, it's my happiness app, and it's sending me some pictures of my husband. So I start scrolling through the pictures, trying to get happy, and then I look over, and sitting next to me on the sofa is my actual husband. And he has his phone out as well. And I can see that on his phone screen, he's looking at a picture of me. And then I look at the two of us sitting next to each other in total silence, looking at pictures of each other on our cell phones. And I think, this is the end of civilization. America has a bit of a happiness obsession. You know, it's right there in the founding documents of the nation. Happiness and assault rifles. Those seem to be the two major take-home messages from the founding fathers. And as a slightly skeptical, slightly reserved Brit, the whole happiness thing can feel quite alien. In the UK, if somebody asks you, how are you, the standard response is, not bad. You know, bad is the baseline, and all emotions must be expressed in multiples of bad. Or can't complain, which we all know is really just an opener for a good 10 minutes of really fulfilling complaining. But here, it seems like if you say anything less than great, everyone starts writing down the phone number for their life coach. It's also something about the extreme positivity here. It's actually a trait that I really admire, this ability to see the positive in almost anything at all. When my son first went to preschool here, he got a report card. And this report card divided up his performance not into strengths and weaknesses, as you might imagine, but into strengths and emerging strengths. Emerging strengths. It actually turned out he had a lot of emerging strengths. We were so proud. We were hoping that one day he might get to go to emerging Harvard. Or problems, that's another one. Apparently in California, there's no such thing as a problem. It's like there's been a state law issued. Problems have been officially renamed opportunities. Don't see it as a problem, see it as an opportunity. Not long ago, I went to the supermarket and I went to use the restroom. And I walked through the door and I immediately trod in a large puddle of urine on the floor. And as I was wiping the pee off my shoe, I looked up and there on the wall was a sign. And this sign said, if this restroom fails to meet your expectations, please inform us of the opportunity. Opportunity. I was like, well, perhaps hygiene was one of their emerging strengths. In the UK, it really is almost the complete opposite. We can be kind of a miserable bunch, let's face it. When I used to work for a large organisation, and at one point our manager decided he'd had enough of what he saw as this pervasive negative attitude amongst the staff. So he booked this motivational trainer to come in and kind of gee us all up a bit. And this trainer had us do this exercise. And we had to sit in a circle, and the first person had to say an idea. And then the next person was supposed to respond to that idea with a statement, starting with the words yes and. da, da, da. And the idea was that we would all build on each other's suggestions rather than trying to knock each other down with a no, but here's all the reasons why that won't work. So it starts off well, first person says his idea, throws it to the next person, and that person responds, yes, and that's bollocks. That kind of sums it up, really. So coming from that mindset, it was really quite a culture shock to see just how seriously people in America really do take the pursuit of happiness. It comes up in conversation all the time, people evangelizing almost about the different plans and schemes and projects that they're undertaking to reach that happy ever after. Whether that's mindfulness, gratitude journaling, positive thinking, self-help books, self-help workshops, goat yoga. It's almost like the way people talk about happess here is like the way people talk about going on a diet. You know, there's not much pleasure involved in it, but it's going to make me a better person. You know? If happiness doesn't hurt, it's not working. And all of this translates into really big business. The self-help industry is worth about $11 billion to the economy, and that's at a very conservative estimate. Americans spend more money and time and sheer emotional energy on trying to be happy than anyone else in the world. So, by rights, they really should be the happiest people on the planet, right? But if you look at the data, really almost the exact opposite is true. People in America rate their own happiness lower than people in almost any other developed nation. They really come right down at the bottom of the list. And one study recently actually ranked the day-to-day contentment of people in the United States as 2 places behind people in Rwanda. I mean, think about that for a second. So what's going wrong? Why is a nation that is so dedicated to the pursuit of happiness really so comparatively unhappy? Well, as a journalist and as a person who is very keen to become happier myself, I became fascinated by this paradox, and I ended up writing a book about it, trying to work out what was going wrong. I had all kinds of adventures in the self-help movement and elsewhere. I got into various sticky situations. I looked at parenthood, I looked at religion, I looked at social media use, I looked at working culture, all to try and work out what was going wrong and what perhaps we might do differently. And also as part of my research, I spent many, many hours reading academic studies on happiness, which, let me tell you, is a fundamentally, deeply joyless experience. Now, it's perhaps a mark of just what a cultural obsession this is, that there have been over 60,000 research studies published into what makes human beings happy. And as I started digging into this vast body of research, I realized pretty quickly that these studies are staggeringly inconsistent. You can find a study that suggests that almost anything is the key to happiness, but also so is its exact opposite. So positive thinking will make you happy, but it will also make you anxious and miserable. Mindfulness is the key to contentment, but mindfulness actually won't really do very much at all. Money is of very little importance to happiness, but it's also crucial. Conservatives are happier than liberals, but liberals are also happier than conservatives. You get the picture. Often these studies end up revealing more about the agendas of the people funding the studies than they do very much about actual human beings. But there was one very notable exception. There was one thing that was completely consistent across all the research. One single factor that contributes more to our happiness than anything else, by a very, very significant margin. In fact, it dwarfs everything else. And this is consistent across race, across class, income, gender, personality type. It really is as close as you can get to a human universal. I don't really like this terminology, but I actually became convinced that it was the secret to happiness. So what is it? Other people. The relationships that we form with the people in our lives, the support that they give us, and the time that we spend with them accounts for a greater proportion of our happiness than anything else. other people. So with this in mind, have a think about some of the common pieces of happiness advice that we tell each other. The kinds of things you'll see shared on social media, written in self-help books, said in graduation speeches, the received wisdom on happiness. Find yourself. Be yourself. Search inside yourself. Happiness comes from within. Don't let your happiness depend on other people. In an individualistic culture, we are taught that if we want to be happy, we should focus on the self. Self-help, self-care, self-knowledge, self-improvement. Self, self, self. We have happiness back to front. And at the same time we're locked into this rat race of the self, we are actually spending surprisingly little time connecting with other people. According to time use data, the average American spends only around 4 minutes a day hosting and attending social events. 4 minutes? I mean, add that up across a year. It barely gets most people through one argument at Thanksgiving with their racist uncle. And when it comes to any form of socialising and communicating at all, where that's our main activity rather than an incidental part of something else, we spend barely 30 minutes a day on that. And that includes the bad communicating as well as all the heartwarming stuff. 30 minutes. So to put that another way, the most important thing we can do for our own well-being, but yet we spend 23.5 hours out of every day focusing on everything but that. So, if you want to be happy, and most of us do, here's my advice. Step off that self-improvement treadmill for a bit. Give yourself a break from trying to be more mindful, more positive, to think better thoughts, to drink more kale juice, to rack up more minutes on your meditation app. And instead, follow the people. Call a friend. Call your mum. Set aside time to really talk with your spouse, really talk with your kids. Arrange to meet someone. Show up. Do someone a favour. Be a good friend. Invest your time and energy into nurturing the relationships with the people in your life, the ones that you love. And thankfully, no app can do that. Thanks very much. Thank you.